Okay, today I'm going to talk about the new diversity requirements of the Oscars. These were just put out not too long ago, and they received a lot of criticism and a decent amount of support. What I'm going to do is I'm going to let you know what the Oscars requirements actually are. Then I'm going to get into the different criticisms of these Oscar awards. And then I'm going to talk about my opinion of this whole entire thing. So the Oscars requirements came out as an attempt to diversify the Oscars because the people that vote for who wins the nominations, they are overwhelmingly and have been overwhelmingly and if you look at the statistics, like in the 90th percentile, they're overwhelmingly white, they're overwhelmingly male, and they're overwhelmingly older people. So you tend to see that voting pattern reflected in who wins the Oscars, at least if you look at the Oscars as a historical example. So these are the different standards. There are 4 standards that have to be met in order to qualify for Best Picture. Now, the Oscars has a lot of different awards that it gives out, but in order to qualify for the Best Picture award, this is what you have to meet. The first standard, you have to have a lead or significant actor from an underrepresented racial or ethnic group, or you have to have at least 30% of all of the actors in minor or secondary roles from either 2 of these, women, racial ethnic group, LGBT, or people with disabilities. The second standard that has to be met is called creative leadership and department heads. It has to have at least two must be women, racial or ethnic group, LGBT, people with disabilities. So at least 2 people in these roles have to be of that demographic. Then it goes on to say at least one of those positions must be minority or ethnic group, a minority ethnic group, right? So you can do that, or you can do at least 6 other crew members are from underrepresented racial groups, or this is the other thing you can do if you can't meet that. At least 30% of the film's crew is women, LGBT, racial minority, or from the disability community. So the third standard is called industry access and opportunities, and you have to meet both of these. You need to have a paid apprenticeship or internship opportunity from the underrepresented groups that I mentioned earlier. And they also make sure that they differentiate between a big production studio, which can sustain an internship, a paid internship or apprenticeship opportunity for those groups, or a smaller studio, which then they have different requirements if you're a smaller studio, so that you can make sure that you can meet those standards. And here's the second requirement you have to meet for standard 3. The film's connected company, so like the production company, has a training or work opportunity for underrepresented groups. So standard number 4, the last standard, multiple in-house senior executives have to be from underrepresented groups that I mentioned earlier, which is whether it's LGBT, racial ethnic minority, women, or people with disabilities. So you can see that it's pretty comprehensive. Like I said, there's 4 standards. Most of it is an attempt to diversify either the film or the people who are making the film, or provide work opportunities and job opportunities for people from underrepresented groups. So I want to go into what the responses have been to this. And the responses from the right are pretty typical here. You have the National Review, which basically called this communism. They called it communism. They said that it was Soviet-style communism, which to me, and I have my notes right here, that's why I'm looking down, which to me is quite ridiculous. I mean, just to be clear here, the communist smear, to call things that you don't like communist, is the same thing the left does when they call things they don't like Nazism. It's not communism. Communism is like a whole nother system. Like, communism is an economic and political system that has nothing to do with a private company or whatever, private nonprofit decides to do with their own property. Like, if I have property and I decide that there's going to be certain requirements for other people to access my property. So like if the Oscars decides that in order for you to win their award, these are the requirements, That's not communism. Communism doesn't even believe in private property. Everything is owned by the government. The government decides what the mandates are. Well, you know what? That's socialism. Communism doesn't even believe in essentially having a government. So I don't see how it's communism. I think what they're referring to when they call things like this communist is cultural Marxism. And what that means is basically anything I don't like, or anything that's not conservative, or anything that's not Christian, or anything that's not traditionalist, it's wrong, and I'm gonna call it Marxism. But what it actually stems from, and I have it pulled up here, it's called the cultural Marxism conspiracy theory. And it says here that it's a far-right anti-Semitic conspiracy theory, which identifies Western Marxism as the basis of an ongoing academic and intellectual movement to undermine and destroy Western cultures and values. So there's no actual such thing as cultural Marxism. And this has been clinged to by paleo-conservatives. It's been clinged to by people in neo-Nazi organizations, the alt-right, white nationalists, to basically say anything of the tenets of multiculturalism, or an attempt to, change the way that things are done, the status quo. They call that cultural Marxism. And this is my problem here because, well, let me go through just a couple more things that were said about it. The National Review is the one that called it communist, which is an absolutely ridiculous thing to say. I don't think that it should be given too much thought if somebody has the nerve to call this communism or socialism, because there's no, that's not an intellectual argument. You're not making a serious argument. You're just kind of saying you don't like it. And if you don't like it, you can just say that you don't like it and state the reasons why, and not do some weird straw man or ad hominem attack where you call it communist or Marxist, because it's not. It's not coming from the government. The government isn't mandating that all businesses have to do this, or that the Oscars have to do this. The Oscars decided for themselves to do this. The New York Post came out with an article, and the New York Post article is a little bit more reasonable. They actually make an argument, and I'm going to address their argument here in a second. The New York Post talked a little bit, well, before I talk about the New York Post article, because I do want to get more in depth and in detail about what the New York Post had to say about it. But another conservative commentator, Ben Shapiro, he talked about how our culture is being infected with this nonsense. He said, if you add together all these groups of people, that they are not a minority and that women are a majority. And what needs to be stated here and clarified is that, yes, if you add together all of the, I believe this is true, if you add together all the Asian, the Black, the Hispanic, or Latin American, and the, Native American groups in this country, or any other racial minority, they're going to probably be a sizable majority, or just barely a majority. And that's not the point here. The point is that the individual groups themselves are a minority, and in a lot of places they're underrepresented. So this is an attempt to address that. It's not, I don't see how the argument of, or how it's relevant to combine all of them and say that they are not a minority. Yes, women are a majority in the country, but that's not taking into consideration what the goal actually is when they're talking about women. The women, historically have not been given the opportunity, or have not been seen as a leadership figure to be able to direct films and to be able to play the, leading role of a movie and things like that. Or if they were, it was in the context of what they were supposed to be like, as far as what society kind of dictated to them. And even the law, in a lot of cases, kind of dictated to them. So this is an attempt to kind of redress that, those grievances that led to the disparities that we have in society today. So he makes a mention of great movies that are white. So he starts talking about, really good movies from World War II that had all white people in it. And this is where I'm like, okay, first of all, the Oscars requirement is only for Best Picture Award. It's only for Best Picture Award. Does that have a big influence? Absolutely it has a big influence. But it doesn't mean that all of a sudden those movies are not going to exist that Ben Shapiro is quoting. Those movies are still going to exist. And they're probably going to win other awards. They're probably just not going to win Best Picture Award unless they meet the certain requirements that the Oscars has put out. But that doesn't mean that it's not going to be a good movie or highly rated by independent rating systems like Rotten Tomatoes or whatever other rating system that you might use to decide what movie you're going to watch. It doesn't mean that it's not going to win other awards. It just means that this award has certain requirements. So it doesn't mean that those movies aren't going to exist anymore. So I'm not sure how that is necessarily so bad. He keeps describing it in a way like he keeps using this kind of language like, oh, they're mandating. They have mandated this. And yet he is the biggest advocate for free markets. I'm an advocate for free markets. And if a free market mandates that their property has to be used in this way, or that if somebody wants to use their property, these are the qualifications, they have a sole right to do so. And it's not a mandate as in a government mandate where somebody's going to come to your house and shoot you if you don't do it or arrest you if you don't do it. No, it's simply a voluntary interaction. If you want to win an Oscars award, you don't have to want to win an Oscars award, but if you want to win Best Picture for the Oscars award, this is the requirement to do so. So back to the New York Post argument. The New York Post makes the argument that most Americans do not watch the Oscars. And they talk about the declining ratings of the Oscars and say that this is just going to basically ruin the Oscars even further and lower its ratings even further. And this argument actually has merit because if you look at what happened after the NBA players started to protest and become very politically engaged in the Black Lives Matter movement, their ratings actually went down. And there were polls that indicated that the reason the ratings went down was because of the protests of the NBA. So I think that argument does have merit. I'm kind of skeptical of the NBA's protests credibility just because of their response to Hong Kong. You know what I mean? Like them being vocal about the misuse and the mistreatment of Hong Kong. Once they got a response from the Chinese government that they were going to face consequences for that, they kind of caved in. So I'm kind of reluctant to give them any credibility. But I will say this. I do think that it might happen that the Oscars, or let me say this, that it could happen that the Oscars ratings go down because of this. But the Oscars ratings were already going down. Not that that's a good thing or anything like that. But I think that that doesn't necessarily say anything bad about the Oscars. It says something to me that there is an issue in our society, that it becomes a problem for people when we try to address these grievances in the past, and we're not doing it by means of the government. We're not trying to force anyone to do anything. It's just individuals taking initiative on their own self to say, I'm going to do something about it. And even that's a problem. So I don't know exactly what people want the solution to be. Like, do they just want no solution? And if you want no solution, I have to question your morals. I have to question your, belief system. Do you believe that there's some, that the systemic racism of the past in America is still affecting the way that things are today? The statistics, the correlations, they all line up and say that they are. Do you believe that there's barriers for women in the workplace? Still, do you believe that women are sexually harassed and oftentimes feel like they have to remain silent about it just in order to keep their job? If like the statistics line up and show that there are some of those problems that are still happening in the United States. So do you want there to be no problem, or do you just want us to continue to pretend like the country doesn't, this is a country where there's no problems and everything is great? Because that's not true. And I want people to, I think that this is good because I don't like when people use the government to force people to do things. But this is completely a voluntary interaction. This is the Oscars saying, okay, we're going to take this initiative ourselves. That's not a bad thing. I think that more people should do that, not less. And I have to question these right-wing commentators and thinkers. Like, you complain most of the time saying that the government should not be involved in people's lives and not dictating what someone can and can't do. So then when individuals do what they want to do, which is a step in the social justice direction, to try to take initiative themselves, you're highly critical of them. You smear them as communists. You use, far right conspiracy theories, smear them as cultural Marxists, as trying to undermine Western institutions. I don't see how allowing for more diversity inside of on your property, to diversify your property, is undermining Western institutions or Western values. I don't see how. I mean, I really don't. How is that taking away from democracy? How is that taking away from, are you saying that it takes away from the merit? I don't think that it necessarily takes away from the merit too. I can address that in another video, but I don't think that it definitely isn't socialist. It's definitely not communist. It's definitely not a government mandated thing. It's only for one of the awards of the Oscars. It's not even for all of the many that they have. It's just for one. It is very thorough. I agree with that. But I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. And I want to know, what solution do you have?